She did not scream. That is the first thing I want you to understand about Nkechi. Because when most people imagine this moment, they imagine screaming. They imagine breaking things. They imagine the kind of reaction that announces itself loudly and leaves evidence on the walls. Nkechi did none of those things. She stood in the doorway of her living room for what she later described as approximately 30 seconds. Long enough to see everything clearly. Long enough for there to be no version of what she was looking at that could be explained differently. Long enough for the full weight of it to move through her body, from her chest to her feet, and settle into the ground beneath her. Then she turned around. She walked back through the front door. She pulled it shut behind her. She sat in her car. She sat there for 11 minutes. She counted them on the dashboard clock because counting was the only thing available to her that did not require her to feel something she was not ready to feel, in a compound where someone might walk out at any moment and see her face. Then Adana called. Her daughter was at school, waiting to be picked up. The meeting had ended and the driver had not arrived, and she was calling her mother the way children call their mothers when something small has gone wrong and they need the world righted immediately. Nkechi answered the phone. Her voice was completely normal. "I'm coming," she said. 5 minutes. She drove to the school. She picked up her daughter. She listened to everything Adana said about her day on the drive home, the friend who had shared her lunch, the teacher who had given unexpected praise, the small politics of a 7-year-old's universe. She responded to all of it appropriately. She brought her daughter into the house. Simi's car was gone. Emeka was in the kitchen. Nkechi said, "Adana, go and change your uniform." Adana went. And then Nkechi stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her husband. Before we continue, dear friends, welcome back. If you are watching part 2 without having seen part 1, I want you to pause and go back. This story cannot be fully understood from the middle. Nkechi's story begins in a university library in Nsukka with a woman who packed extra food and changed the direction of a man's life with nothing but her own resources and her own belief. You need to see where she came from to understand what she is about to do. For those who have been here since the beginning, thank you for waiting. I told you this story deserved to be heard in full. Now, let us continue. Please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment below, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. I read every single one. She looked at him for a long time before she spoke. Emeka was at the stove, doing something ordinary with his hands, the practiced ease of a man in his own kitchen performing a task that has no weight because he does not yet know she knows. Or perhaps he did know. Perhaps the stillness with which he was performing the ordinary task was the stillness of a man who has heard a car in the compound and is now waiting to find out exactly what the next few minutes will require of him. She said, "When did it start?" He turned around. His face did the thing faces do when the question arrives before the person was ready for it. A brief reorganization. A decision being made in real time about which version of the next moment to occupy. She waited. He said, "Nkechi." She said, "I'm not asking you to decide how to say it. I'm asking you when it started." He set down what he was holding. He said, 3 months ago. She received that number the way you receive information that you already knew but had been hoping was wrong. 3 months, she said. Not a question. She was counting. 3 months ago, she had been sitting in this same kitchen helping him prepare for a procurement presentation. She had stayed up until 1 in the morning reviewing his slides, fixing the language in 3 sections that were technically correct but not persuasive enough, printing the final copies herself because the office printer had developed a problem, and the presentation was at 8 the next morning. 3 months ago, she had been doing that. She looked at him. "Get out of my kitchen," she said quietly. He moved. That night, after Adana was in bed, they sat in the living room. The same living room where Simi had sat with her hands folded and her expression of practiced gratitude 3 months ago, asking for help with a university admission. The help Nkechi had given. The door Nkechi had opened. The favor she had spent 30 years of relationship capital to call in. Emeka spoke first. He said everything people say in these moments. He said it was a mistake. He said it was not what she thought it was. He said it had never been serious. He said he did not know how it happened. He said he was going to end it. He said he was sorry. He said, please. Nkechi listened to all of it. Then she said something that silenced him completely. She said, I want you to think about something. The girl came through my door. I opened that door. I used my connections, my relationships, my name to give her something she needed. And she came back into my house and she took something from me. Do you understand what kind of irony that is? He was quiet. She continued. I have been opening doors for people my entire adult life. I opened the door for your younger sister when she needed school fees. I opened the door for your cousins when they needed housing. I opened the door for your career, your business. Every introduction that made you who you are was made because I walked you through a door that I had spent years earning the right to knock on. She paused. And this is what came through my door. He had no answer. There's no answer to a truth that specific. She stood up. She said, I'm going to sleep in Adana's room tonight. We are not going to have this conversation again tonight. And tomorrow, when she has gone to school, we are going to have the only conversation that matters, which is what happens now. She left the room. He sat alone in the living room for a long time. In the kitchen, the stove was still on. He had forgotten to turn it off. There's a woman I want you to understand before I tell you what Nkechi decided. She is not a saint. I have said this before, and I will say it again because it matters. She is not a fictional character built from the best qualities of every woman who ever lived. She is a real woman with real exhaustion and real fear and real grief and real anger. The anger was present. I want to be honest about that. She was not at peace. She was not immediately graceful. Behind the closed door of her daughter's room that night, while Adana slept, Nkechi was as angry as a person has the right to be. She went over it in the dark. The earrings, the immigration office, the job interviews in the unfamiliar city, the garri they ate together in the one-room flat when there was nothing else. The years she spent building his network from the inside of her own. The job she left because something had to be. The years. She went over all of it in the dark and she felt every bit of what it was worth and what it had cost and what had been done with it. And then sometime in the early hours of the morning when the anger had burned through enough of itself to leave a space, she asked herself the question she had been avoiding. What do you actually want? Not what you are entitled to, not what would feel satisfying in the immediate term. What do you actually want for your life from this point? She lay in the dark with that question for a long time. The conversation the next morning was the kind of conversation that changes everything, regardless of how it ends. Emeka came to it with the specific humility of a man who has had a night to understand the full scale of what he has done and is no longer making calculations about how to minimize it. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where they had eaten Gary together in the early years. And he did not perform contrition. He simply sat in it. She said, I need you to answer something honestly, and I need you to understand that I will know if you are not being honest because I have known you for 15 years and I know every version of your face. He nodded. Is it over? He said yes. Not because I found out. He looked at her. It was already over. Before you came home yesterday, I had ended it the week before. She watched his face. She believed him.
This was not relief. She was careful not to let it become relief prematurely, but she believed him. Why? She asked. He knew what she was asking. Not why did you end it? Why did it begin? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something she had not expected. He said, because I forgot who I was before you. She looked at him. When I had nothing, I knew exactly what mattered. I knew what it cost, and I was grateful for every single thing. But when the money came, when the business grew, when the name meant something, I started to believe it was about me. I started to walk through rooms like I had arrived there by myself. His voice was very even. I forgot every door you opened. I forgot every night you chose to stay. I forgot who I was before you looked at me and told me I was going to be someone important. The kitchen was completely silent. I did not forget you, he said. I forgot myself. And when you forget yourself, you become capable of things the person you actually are would never do. She sat with that for a long time. She called her mother that afternoon. She did not tell her everything, not because she was hiding it, but because some things need to be processed before they can be shared even with the person you trust most. She told her enough. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what do you want to do? Not what should you do? Not what does the Bible say? Not what will people think? What do you want to do? Nkechi said, I don't know yet. Her mother said, then don't decide yet. A decision made in the first week of this kind of pain is almost never the right decision. Not because staying is always right or leaving is always wrong, but because you deserve to make this choice from your full self, not from the part that is bleeding. She paused. Then she said, whatever you decide, I am on the other side of it. You understand me? Whatever you decide. Nkechi held the phone for a long time after they hung up. She made 2 decisions in the days that followed. The first decision was that Emeka was to call his mentee, the young engineer, Simi's brother, and tell him the full truth of what had happened. Not a sanitized version, not a diplomatic version, the truth. And whatever consequence that had for the business relationship, Emeka would absorb without complaint. Emeka made the call. The conversation was brief and brutal and honest. The mentee, to his credit, did not make excuses for his sister or deflect the consequence onto Nkechi. He was quiet for most of the call, and when he spoke, he said only this: I am sorry, and I understand if this ends our working relationship. Emeka said it did not end it. The mentee said, that is more than I deserve. Emeka said, your sister's choices are not your debt to pay. Your work with me stands on its own record. Keep delivering the way you have been delivering. Nkechi heard about this conversation from Emeka afterward. She thought about the young man for a while. She thought about her sister. She felt something about both of them that she would need more time to fully identify. The second decision was harder. She told Emeka that she was going back to work. Not because they needed the income, not because she was punishing him, because her mother had said, make sure you are becoming something too. And for years she had stored that advice and not fully followed it, and she was not willing to continue not following it. She was going to call her former boss. She was going to ask if there was a position or a consulting arrangement that she could step into. She was going to rebuild her professional identity she had put aside for a marriage and a household and a man's career. Emeka said, "I support that completely." She said, "I know, but I want you to understand that I am not doing it with your support. I am doing it for myself. You can be supportive, that is welcome, but this is mine." He heard the difference. He said, "I understand." She called her former boss on a Thursday morning. The woman answered on the second ring. When Nkechi explained why she was calling, there was a pause on the line. Then her former boss said, "I have been waiting for this call for 4 years. What took you so long?" Nkechi laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in a week. It was the kind of laugh that arrives unexpectedly and feels like a window opening in a room that has been closed. They met for lunch. Her former boss had moved into pharmaceutical industry consulting, the kind of work that draws on 30 years of connections and delivers expert guidance to companies that cannot afford to make expensive mistakes. She needed a research analyst who could read data with precision and translate it into recommendations that non-scientists could act on. Nkechi's entire career, her academic training, her research background, her years of industry knowledge, everything she had built before she set it aside pointed directly at this role. She started the following Monday. The marriage did not heal overnight. I want to be clear about that. Some stories in this space present reconciliation as a clean arc. Betrayal happens, conversation happens, forgiveness happens, everything returns to its previous state. That is not how real things work. What happened between Nkechi and Emeka was slower and less certain and more honest than a clean arc. There were weeks when the distance between them in the same house was vast, when they navigated around each other with the careful politeness of people who are not yet sure what they are to each other anymore. There were nights when Adana would come and climb into their bed and lie there between them, and both of them would lie there in the dark with their daughter between them, and neither of them would speak. But something about the presence of this child they had made together would hold the room. There were conversations, many of them. Some of them went well, some of them did not. Some of them opened things that then had to be closed again gradually over the following days. Emeka attended counseling, not because Nkechi asked, because he arrived at it himself, which is the only way it means anything. He came home one evening from his session and sat down across from her at the kitchen table and said, "I have been spending my whole life being grateful to you and never asking myself whether I had become someone who deserved you." She looked at him. "That ends now," he said. "Not for the marriage, for me, because I do not want to be a person who becomes unconscious of what he had been given." She said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "The boy who divided his last piece of bread so his younger brother would not go hungry, that is the man I chose. Not the business, not the properties, not the name in the industry, that boy." She paused. "Find him and bring him back, and we will talk." He said, "He has been here the whole time. He just got buried." She said, "Then dig." There is something else I have not told you. Something that happened 6 weeks after everything. On an ordinary Tuesday that Nkechi has not fully made sense of herself. She received a message. It was from Simi. Not a long message, not an elaborate apology constructed to be impressive. 4 sentences. It said, "I know I have no right to contact you. I know there is nothing I can say that reduces what I did. I have been trying to understand why I made the choices I made, and I don't have a satisfying answer. I am sorry, not for being caught, for doing it." Nkechi read the message 3 times. Then she put down her phone and went back to the report she was working on. She did not respond. Not that day, not that week. She sat with the message the way she sat with everything that required careful thought, not rushing toward a response, not performing forgiveness before she had actually reached it, not refusing to consider it simply because considering it was uncomfortable. After 3 weeks, she picked up her phone. She wrote, "I received your message. I am not ready to respond to it fully, but I read it." She sent it. She put down her phone. That was not forgiveness. It was the acknowledgement that forgiveness is a process rather than a declaration, that it moves at its own pace in a direction that cannot be forced. Nkechi had spent 30 years being generous with other people. She was going to be generous with herself too, on her own timeline. The evening I want to leave you with is not a dramatic one. It is ordinary in the specific way that things become ordinary after they have survived being extraordinary. It is a Sunday, 6 months after everything. Nkechi is in her home office, which she has reorganized since going back to work. New shelves, new desk arrangement, her name on a printed consulting credential framed on the wall, the one her former boss had insisted on ordering for her on the first day. It is small. It is hers entirely. Emeka knocks. He asks if she wants tea. She says yes. He brings it. He sets it on her desk and looks at what she is working on with the genuine interest of someone who is learning to see his wife as a person with a professional world of her own, rather than as the person who manages the edges of his. He asks one question about the report. She answers it. Emeka nods. He says, "You are good at this." She says, "I know." He smiles. He leaves. She drinks her tea. She goes back to work. This is not the ending. I want to be honest with you about that. There is no clean ending to a story like this because real lives do not end. They continue. They accumulate. They complicate themselves with new mornings and new decisions, and new opportunities to either become or diminish. What I can tell you is this: Nkechi is still standing. Not in the way people stand when they have nothing else available. In the way people stand when they have assessed everything they are made of and decided that none of it has been taken. Not the earrings, not the immigration office, not the years, not the work she did in the
Dark for a man who forgot temporarily what he had been given. None of it has been taken. It is still hers. All of it. The library in Nsukka, the mango on the table, the gari by candlelight, the doors she opened, the connections she built, the daughter she raised, the career she reclaimed, the marriage she decided with full information and full awareness to continue building. All of it, hers. Dear friends, if you have stayed to the end of this story, both parts, I want you to sit with what you are feeling for a moment before you go. Nkechi's story is not a story about whether to stay or leave. It is a story about a woman who gave everything she had for 30 years and discovered that the giving had not diminished her. That after everything, she was still fully herself. That the earrings were gone, but the woman who gave them was intact. That the years were spent, but the person who spent them was still standing. That is the thing that jealousy and betrayal are designed to make you forget. They are designed to make you believe that what was done to you is the final definition of what you are worth. It is not. What you are worth is what Nkechi has always been worth. Everything she carried into that library at Nsukka. The intelligence, the warmth, the discipline, the ability to see something in a person before they could see it in themselves. Nobody took that. Nobody can. If you are Nkechi, hear this. Your investment in someone else's becoming does not disappear when they behave badly. It lives in you. The generosity was yours. The sacrifice was yours. The 30 years of choosing well, even when the choosing was expensive, was yours. And it is still there, available to you, for yourself, on your own timeline. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me if this story found you at the right moment. Tell me which part of part 2 you are still sitting with. I read every single comment, every one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being the person who gives everything does not mean you lose everything. That the ladder you built for someone else is yours too. That the woman at the top of it is you. Subscribe and turn on the bell. This channel carries stories like this one, and there are more coming.
Until next time, dear friends, you are not defined by what was done with what you gave. You are defined by the quality of what you gave. And Nkechi gave everything. Good night.